once again welcome to the 2011 National Flood Conference here in New Orleans. Now, we had the last flood conference here in 2002. Little did anybody know that just over 3 years later, the area would be devastated by Hurricane Katrina. But if you've had a chance to tour the city at all, beyond Bourbon Street, you'll see that they're doing just fine in recovering and making it once more the Big Easy. Now, we're going to start rolling right away here this morning with FEMA's Administrator, Craig Fugate, because he's made a special effort to get here. He just flew in from Alabama, and once he gets done giving his remarks here today, he's going to fly off to Tennessee. So he's a very busy man. We are really appreciative that he's here. Join me in welcoming to the stage Mr. Craig Fugate.
Morning. Yeah, it's been kind of hectic. I'm going to bring you up to speed on the disasters. With recent announcements last night, I think it's a risk that people are going to lose focus on what's going on right now in the communities that have been devastated by tornadoes. And also we have some very significant floods and flood risk that is occurring along the Mississippi and its tributaries. This oftentimes gets lost in the background of national news, but the people that are being impacted is what they're dealing with right now today. So let's start back last week. We had a rather strong system come through. The National Weather Service Storm Prediction Center had issued their highest level of risk for tornado outbreaks across much of the South. We unfortunately saw that play out, first in Arkansas, and then on Wednesday, starting in the morning, and then persisting into the afternoon with something that is rare to see in the South, and that is on their scale, the enhanced geoscale, F5 tornadoes striking in Mississippi, destroying an entire town. Now, when you talk about destroying an entire town, that's really hard to fathom until you realize the post office is gone, the Piggly Wiggly is gone, the Dollar General store is gone, the water tower antenna was bent over when a car hit it in the dome. Now think about that. You see most of these small town water towers, how high they are. A car literally hit the top of it, dented the tank, and knocked the antenna over that the fire department uses. If that had been the only area of devastation, it by its own merits would be a tremendous response to have to go into. But it wasn't the only community. As these tornadoes moved across Alabama, they stayed on the ground. And the death toll, unfortunately, has now exceeded even the 1974 super outbreak. And they're still looking. People are missing. I got down there Thursday afternoon. We flew from Birmingham up to Tuscaloosa. This is something, people say, have you ever seen anything like this? I said, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of tornadoes. There was nothing that I was seeing that I haven't seen before. What I hadn't seen, the track from Birmingham to Tuscaloosa had no brakes. And if you've ever been in areas that kind of hill, you know the tornadoes kind of skip across the tops and down in the valleys, the trees are still standing. Not in these tornadoes. And when you got into the communities themselves, you see this occasionally, but you don't see it very often, where block after block along that path is just debris. The only reason you know there's a house there is because you can find a slab. And that traditionally we think about the mobile homes, and that's always where the greatest loss of life is. Not in these. It didn't matter. It just literally destroyed everything in its path. Many towns in northern Alabama, towns all the way over to northwest Georgia, into southeast Tennessee. We even had this system producing tornadoes all the way up in Virginia with impacts. North Carolina, which had been hit several weeks earlier, saw some more, but fortunately no significant additional impacts. This is set in the backdrop of what is turning out to be an historical flood season as well on the Mississippi River Valley. You're hearing today about the Corps of Engineers having to make decisions about opening up floodways and the impacts that will have. and the alternatives if they don't, what the consequences will be for the communities that may have additional failures. You're talking sand bowls across levee systems that they've never seen before. And now we have a longer threat with more rain in this valley that is potentially going to push river levels even higher. We're starting to see a lot of tributaries backing up, flooding. And so as you go to New Orleans for a conference, I think it's important to understand that in this backdrop, we are dealing with one of the worst fire seasons that Texas has ever had. We've had one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks the United States has ever seen, second only to one previous event, and they're still looking for the missing. And we're getting reports from the Corps and from the Weather Service that potentially we could see flood stages approaching the 27th flood, particularly if we continue to get more rain. So these are the things that we at FEMA are focused on, but we're also focused on not just response. We have recovery still going on in this community from Katrina. We are focused on mitigating future hazards wherever we can, leveraging those dollars to build back better and stronger, to buy out vulnerable programs, and to continue to do mitigation. And oftentimes a very austere and sometimes hostile budget environment where we're having to justify why mitigation is so key. And we're always preparing for the next disaster, which unfortunately this spring has been a rapid succession of back-to-back events. So let's talk about flood. Let's talk about flood insurance. Let's talk about the national flood programs. Congress is currently looking at reauthorization. And in the House, I had an opportunity to testify. And although there are a lot of things in the flood insurance program that structurally kind of give us pause when we look at how do you maintain a program that is both affordable and provides coverage to people, yet is not a burden beyond a point of which the taxpayers are having to heavily subsidize it. Ed Connors is kind of proud of the fact that we started out when I got there close to $19 billion. We've actually been able to pay down some of the debt from Katrina. But it's nearly impossible for us to retire that debt based upon the amount of coverage we provide, that income we come in, and what we pay out in losses. And now again, looking at forecasts for active hurricane seasons, seeing significant flood risk along the Mississippi River valleys, and again have already seen flooding in many states that have been tied to these spring storm systems. Some of our recommendations are pretty much common sense. One of which is, whatever we do, we need to get a reauthorization that goes beyond just reauthorizing every 30 days, every couple of months. It's hard for the Right Your Own and other folks to maintain stability in the programs. So we agree and support the industry position to provide a longer reauthorization. There are some folks that say, well, if you do it too long, we'll never get Congress to come back and fix and work on things. I think that there's a balance here. If we can get the reauthorization 3 to 5 years, however far we can get it, that we're not locked into not being able to work on the NFIP. Because the other part of it is to give us some opportunity and flexibility to pilot some things and also look at some of our existing authorities that we have not. I am firmly convinced the way to make the National Flood Insurance Program work is to engage the private sector in figuring out a better way to manage the risk rather than just trying to manage it with the taxpayers. As I like to tell people, have you ever run an insurance company where the people who own the policy set the rates? But that's the flood insurance program. I mean, their board of directors is Congress. So I think, again, when we look at floods, we look at the flood insurance program, and we look at where we're at with Congress. The two things we most strongly encourage Congress to do is to give us a longer time frame for reauthorization and look at the things they want to address in pilot programs and give us the flexibility to implement many of those to see what works and doesn't work as we continue to refine the flood insurance program so that people have the coverage they need to protect them against multi-peril, of which only one that we're dealing with specifically is flood. That two, we have minimized the risk to the taxpayer while maintaining affordable products to the public that will need to buy them. And three, we manage our risk not just with the tools of insurance or with various types of ordinances required to minimize the specific flood risk, in adopting ordinances to be eligible for the National Flood Insurance Program. But we take a step back and realize that watersheds are not just merely an issue when it floods. Between droughts, water consumption, and sustainable populations, these all need to be looked at so that we're taking a holistic look and going, what are the impacts to our environment? What is the impact to our watershed drinking water commerce? Not just looking at one facet of the hydrological cycle, which is flood. I mean, there's a certain, you flip this around, there's a lot of people say, the problem with droughts is every time we get serious about fixing it, it rains. Well, I think one of the problems about floods are every time it about gets to the point where we're going to have to fix it, it stops flooding. In either case, we shouldn't just be basing upon the extremes, the decisions we need to make of how to manage our risk in our communities, both in the acute phase, but more importantly, long term. Water is a resource. Just because it's flooding doesn't negate the fact that at some point we are still having to manage that resource. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team, because I get to go back to work and get out of a suit. All right. I got one challenge for you, though. How many people here got a phone and got $20 you're going to use tonight at Harris? Or if you're going to use it at Harris, I got a better use for it. I got a challenge for you. Our volunteer agencies are doing the bulk of the mass care right now in the states impacted. A lot of folks gave a lot of money to help in Japan, but the problem is they don't know how bad it is in the Southeast and how much the Salvation Army and Red Cross need our help. So, text GIVE to 80888 for $10 for the Salvation Army, and text Red Cross to 90999 to help out the Red Cross. You'll be billed $10 on your cell phone. Trust me, it's a lot more meaningful than that $20 you're going to lay down at Harris. Pass the word. Thank you.